Hello, Mr. Rose. This is United Nations headquarters in New York. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Let me plug.
You haven't pinned yet? Okay, in the meanwhile, I'm going to mute your microphone. You can keep your camera on. We'll just mute your microphone. Okay.
Great. All right, thank you.
Things on.
Do not disturb is on. I'm going to turn off.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can we please have our guests on the screen, if possible? Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much. We are very pleased to be joined today by two spokespeople from UNRWA in Gaza, Louise Wateridge, Senior Communications Officer, and Sam Rose, Senior Deputy Field Director, who will brief you virtually from Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. Ms. Wateridge and Mr. Rose, welcome. Mr. Wateridge, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Yes, so we are in the middle area of the Gaza Strip, and to describe the situation here, it's just catastrophic. The last couple of weeks, we have had relentless forced displacement orders in the middle area, in the southern area, and also in northern Gaza Strip. And what we're seeing here is hundreds of thousands of people forced to move on a daily basis. It's really changed over the last few weeks, the last couple of months. What we're seeing now is families, mothers, children dragging their belongings. Most people are moving by foot. There's very limited access to any kind of vehicles for this kind of displacement now. And people just don't know where to go. If you see the humanitarian area, if you see the Khan Yunis, Mawasi area, you can barely even see the sand of the floor anymore. It is just packed, shelter to shelter. People are using the sand and building walls with the sand to stop the seawater coming into their makeshift shelters. So that's the kind of dire conditions that we are experiencing here. There are scorpions, there are mosquitoes, rats, mice, snakes among the population who are living in these conditions. We're seeing an increase in spread of disease. As most are aware, we've now had the first confirmed case of polio in the Gaza Strip since the last 25 years. And this really just speaks to how dire the conditions here are in terms of, lack of access to clean drinking water, the trash that is piling up everywhere among the population, among the conditions where they are living, sewage water, which is absolutely filthy. Again, people living among this, and desperation. When you speak to people here, when we speak to our colleagues, there is very limited hope now. People are really, really, as always, hoping for a ceasefire. They express to us that is their only hope now. It feels that you are never very far away from the front line. Really, the space that people have been confined to is so minimal. There are tanks in areas that used to be designated as safe areas. And this is just another testament to there being nowhere safe in the Gaza Strip. People have nowhere to go. There is nowhere to find safety. It's very limited access to humanitarian resources. Because the humanitarian operations are also being displaced within these evacuation orders. And the humanitarian response here is being completely strangled and limited to our ability of what we can do. I will pass to my colleague Sam Rose to continue the briefing.
Thanks, Louise, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. And I mean, look, as Louise said, it's a particularly fragile moment. We've seen a slew of evacuation orders over the first weeks of August, a couple of 100,000 people on the move yet again. And just like them, we are being squeezed into ever smaller areas of Gaza. The humanitarian zone declared by Israel has shrunk. It's now about 11% of the entire Gaza Strip. And this isn't 11% of land that is fit for habitation, fit for services, fit for life, really. These are sand dunes, these are crowded areas where, as Louise said, people are living cheek by jowl, doing whatever they can to get by. The streets are packed as people receive evacuation orders. They're on the move. They don't know what to do. Do they stay? Do they wait? Or do they go now? They're faced with impossible choices, and essentially what's happening is more families are being split as some stay put and others try and find whatever it is that they can find to put up their meager belongings. And this is the environment we're in: lack of access to aid, lack of access to services, to water, to healthcare. And it's precisely in these circumstances that polio has recently re-emerged in Gaza with a small number of cases that could spread very rapidly. It's really that perfect storm of conditions that have created the environment in which polio can occur. Malnourished children, a decimated health sector, very poor water and sanitation services and conditions, people living amid garbage, living amid lakes of sewage. They're stressed, they're anxious, immune systems are suppressed. So it's precisely the eventualities that we as an international community have been warning about for so long are now coming to pass. We're working collectively. All our efforts are now geared on making the polio campaign, which will start this Saturday, into a success. It involves mass human resources. Over 3,000 people in total will be working on the campaign, over 1,000 of them drawn from UNRWA, which is essentially the largest primary healthcare provider left in the Gaza Strip. The vaccines have come in. We're calling for calm. We're calling for humanitarian pauses that will allow the vaccination programs to pass and be implemented successfully. We continue to hope for the best, and we have to, because without that, everything is gone. But look, the past 10 months have just told us that the only thing we can say with any certainty is that tomorrow will be worse than today. That's the nature of the environment. It's the nature of the situation that unfortunately we are dealing with here. And the people of Gaza, the 2.1 million civilians, are continuing to live through on a daily basis. That's all I think I wanted to say. We'll hand back to you, and we're very happy to take questions for as long as you have.
Thank you very much. Michelle, please go ahead.
Hi, both. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Thanks so much for doing this briefing for us. We really appreciate it. We've just heard from a senior UN official who said that given the evacuation order that was made yesterday in the area where the UN Central Command for all aid operations has been made, that as of today, basically all UN humanitarian operations have ground to a halt because conditions just don't allow for them to take place. What can you tell us about that, and how might this affect the upcoming polio vaccination?
Thank you. No, thanks for the question. Look, indeed, yeah, it was about this time yesterday evacuation orders were issued. There've been a slew of them over August, I think 13 or 15 in August to date. The ones last night affected a block of Gaza in which a number of UN international guest houses were situated. So a number of UN staff on the move, their buildings are evacuated. We're in the UNRWA guest house here, and we're accommodating a number of international staff. Others had to spend the night in one of our warehouses down in Khan Yunis. I mean, what I can say is that the humanitarian operations have been incredibly squeezed. We're getting very little aid supply in through Kerem Shalom. We estimate that 1 million people who we plan to assist with food aid in August will go without. But look, for UNRWA, we deliver our services directly through our workforce of 5,000 staff who are working on any given day. Our health services continue across 8 or 9 primary healthcare centres and over 90 health points that are operating in and around schools that have turned into shelters, where literally hundreds of thousands of people are seeking shelter. Those services are continuing, but indeed the space and the ability of the UN system, of the humanitarian system, to operate in Gaza is becoming increasingly difficult, is becoming increasingly constrained at a time when we need to throw all resources at this to deal with the issues that we're facing.
And just a really quick follow-up, you mentioned that there's 1,000 UNRWA staff involved in the polio campaign. Are they still working for UNRWA, or have they been seconded to a different agency? Because if I recall correctly, the Israeli ambassador said last week that UNRWA wasn't involved.
We're massively involved. I'm not sure there's a single UN entity anywhere in the world that would have been able to mobilize like we have mobilized to continue delivering health services across the Gaza Strip. We have over 1,000 people normally in our health clinics. We provide more primary healthcare consultations than any other entity across Gaza. We are not involved in bringing the vaccines in, but we are a key health provider and the only United Nations entity that will be delivering those vaccines through our health clinics. Other workers in other parts of the health system will be involved, but UNRWA is a critical and integral part of the public health system inside Gaza, and we are indeed a key player in that campaign. We estimate 640,000 children will be vaccinated, and up to 40% of those children receiving vaccines will receive those vaccines from UNRWA, but it's very much a whole of UN system effort involving different entities with different roles and different responsibilities.
Thank you very much. Sherwin, please.
Hi, Sam and Louise. This is Sherwin Briceby, South African Broadcasting. I guess we're just struggling to understand how you're going to reach the 640,000 you're talking about. As Michelle pointed out, we heard that UN operations largely have come to a halt in Gaza. You're talking about being squeezed. Do people have to line up for these vaccines? Where will they go for these vaccines? I don't understand how you're going to achieve the 640,000 given the conditions under which you're operating now.
Look, you're right. It will be incredibly difficult. We have delivered health services through thick and thin in Gaza over the past 75 years, partly through those health services that have been continued to deliver through conflict, through displacement, and it's partly through that we've been able to eradicate these communicable diseases over time, which have sadly re-emerged. We're calling for a pause, a humanitarian pause, to allow us to deliver those vaccinations safely so that the children and their parents can bring them to the clinics, so that our staff, our mobile staff, we have over 90 teams of mobile staff who will be working around the shelters, working around the clinics and the schools to deliver those vaccines. But it will be a very difficult operation, and it will depend, its success will depend very much on the conditions on the ground at the time. We and the rest of the system involved will do our absolute utmost to deliver the campaign, because without it, we know that the conditions will just be worse, sadly. But yeah, it's not guaranteed that it will be a success. We estimate around 95% of children need to receive the vaccines for the campaign to be a success. And look, I think the other thing I'd just add very quickly is that for those who do contract polio and who do get sick, the prospects for them as well are incredibly bad. If it's the sewage and it's the water conditions that have led to them contracting polio, they need treatment in healthcare facilities, in hospitals and clinics, many of which are only partially operating and have been for several months due to the conflict.
And if I may add to that, everything seen here has been unprecedented so far. Everything the United Nations has achieved in the Gaza Strip has been unprecedented. The conditions are unprecedented. Every day is a new challenge. Yes, this polio vaccination campaign is a challenge, a very, very big challenge for every partner involved, for the United Nations, for the families, for the children who are all living this fear and this displacement. It's a challenge for everyone, but I've seen, water wells here completely destroyed and then rebuilt by UNRWA staff in a matter of weeks. How did they rebuild it? There are no parts of it. They're sourcing parts from broken down cars and fixing, things that you would say the unfixable, and now providing water to 100,000 people again because of it. Everything here is a challenge. Everything here is a struggle. This is the next in line, but the staff are dedicated and people will continue finding a way. It amazes me every day. They continue to come to work. Most of our colleagues are displaced. They are part of this population. They are struggling. What do they do with their families? The bombing and the strikes is relentless every night, every day. There is no safety. Everybody knows there's no safety. And yet they know it's for the best thing for the children, the best thing for their community. So they still come out and they want to be a part of this and to achieve this for themselves, for the community.
Thank you. Edie, please.
Thank you very much, Edith Lederer from the Associated Press, and thanks for doing this on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. I just wanted to clarify a few things. Today is, you said UNRWA health facilities are operating. Are any Palestinians anywhere in Gaza getting food today? And are your other operations going on as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have the precise figures in front of me. As I say, we estimate we're falling short as a system overall on 1 million people in the month in terms of food aid. And this is a build-up of of problems over several months. The problems at the crossing point, breakdown in law and order due to the absence of civilian staff, and the fact that people are constantly moving around and reaching those people with these life-saving services becoming increasingly difficult. We're bringing in very small numbers of trucks, we as a system, on any given day. We have, in recent days, been able to provide emergency food parcels to families facing displacement, facing bombardment, but at much lower levels than we have been able to in the past, and at much lower levels than are needed. We estimate that 500 trucks a day, as you probably recall, are needed. We're getting in as a system, around about 100 trucks a day, and this is precisely why we're seeing increases in in rates of malnutrition, in suppression of immune systems, and as well as the aid coming in. It's the services that people are able to access. With every evacuation, there are more services that become inaccessible, and what we've seen in Deir al-Balah, in the middle area, over the past couple of days, is loss of access to some of the main water points in those areas. So people surviving on absolutely minimal amounts of water. Our ability to repair those networks as well, massively constrained as well because of restrictions on entry of supplies, on entry of chlorine, to carry out purification, to carry out basic sanitary activities. You can't find soap on the market. Bars of soap are increasingly difficult to find. The probably most effective thing for basic hygiene, people no longer have, because of the difficulties and the grind and of life in Gaza, unfortunately.
Go ahead, please.
Just to add a recent UNICEF assessment, so this was in July, that 6% of children in the south and 1% of children in the north are getting the dietary requirements needed. So what that means is, meat, fish, fruit, vegetables, children are lacking this. And this is what their UNICEF assessment has found. So even when food is getting to people, there's been 10 months of a very severe lack of nutrition and clean water, as Sam said. Thank you.
I was asking because I'm trying to reconcile what the senior UN official said, that the UN is unable to operate today, and you're saying that, yes, your health facilities are still operating, and perhaps some food is getting to certainly very few people, but some people. And I wonder if you could address that, and then I have one last follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our services are continuing to the extent that they're able to continue, and UNRWA operates differently from other UN agencies in the sense that we deliver our services directly, predominantly through national Palestinian staff, which is quite different to the operating model for the rest of the UN system. Today has been more difficult. The past 24 hours have been incredibly difficult, particularly for some of our international colleagues. But for our national staff, many of whom I've been speaking to today, the clinics are open, where they are able to open. Our offices are open. Some services are continuing. I can only really speak on behalf of UNRWA, but I would estimate that 15,000 people today have received health services provided by UNRWA staff across the Gaza Strip.
Great. And in Deir al-Balah, we were told that the UN operations headquarters was ordered to evacuate. I know you were talking about these 5 guest houses, so do you know about the operations center? Are they looking for a new place? Have they found a new place? I assume you would be in contact with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that was a reference to the OCHA offices, where the UN, OCHA is a coordination office, bring everyone together there. That was one of the guest houses / offices that was in the evacuation zone, one of the blocks where people were ordered to or given strong warnings to leave ahead of military operations. They have had to evacuate. When they will be able to go back, I don't know. We'd have to ask them. But the meetings that would previously take place there will now take place in a large UNRWA office in Khan Yunis. It was previously actually a large UNRWA office in Rafah, where we were providing these facilities and these services in Tel Sultan up until May, when again we were forced to evacuate. But yeah, those meetings, that convening hub will now be at one of the UNRWA offices, an UNRWA health center actually in Khan Yunis.
And what this does is it just adds to the confusion and the uncertainty. You know, we had a group of humanitarians who were displaced themselves last night, in addition to the population. But this isn't the first time. You know, as Sam said, there's been around 15 displacement orders in the last month, in just August alone. We've lost access to water wells, to reservoirs, to, you know, warehouses. This isn't the first time this month that humanitarians have had to, you know, reshape the humanitarian response. This has been happening for the last 10 months. Every time there is an evacuation order issued, our facilities are very often in those areas, and we have to stop what we're doing and rethink everything. Move somewhere else, move the health centres, rehabilitate health centres that have been destroyed and start using them again, add additional health clinics and health points into the shelters. You know, we're doing anything and everything possible to keep personnel moving, to keep services going, moving medicine, moving equipment, moving everything we can. Finding new spaces to have as warehouses and distribution centres. But yeah, this is normal. This has been the unprecedented situation in this war. Every day, you don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what faces, and we have to take the challenges as they come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Abdel Hamid, please.
Thank you. Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. And thank you for the briefing. I have few questions. Could you tell us what happened today, this morning, in Al-Aqsa Hospital? They were also ordered to evacuate. So what's going on, if you have first-hand information? And second, after Israel declared UNRWA as a terrorist organization, look who's talking, how is your relation with Israel? Do you tell them where you're moving? Do they cooperate with you? Is there any communication channels between you and Israel? And lastly, to Louise question. You said this is unprecedented. So what do you call what's going on in Gaza other than a killing field or a slaughterhouse? Thank you.
So on the Al-Aqsa Hospital, we don't have first-hand knowledge of this. It's actually very difficult even for us to move because the military operations in the areas in Deir al-Balah, in Khan Yunis, are so intense, and they have been for the last weeks, really. There's tanks on the ground, there's you know, strikes, there's bombing from land, sea and air. So our movement is extremely limited because of this immediate danger and the threat. We've seen this before. We've seen health facilities that have been in close proximity to evacuation orders, if not in them. And a lot of the time, you know, they have to do what they can. So maybe they move patients before the entire population decides to flee that area. They try to transfer patients. They try to move medicine. Similar to what I was just saying about just reinventing the humanitarian response as this war continues. In terms of our coordination with Israel, we are in coordination with Israel on a daily basis. The United Nations, we coordinate all of our movements. We coordinate, you know, the humanitarian supplies coming into the Gaza Strip, and we continue to coordinate and share our coordinates with them. You know, we have these facilities that are they're deconflicted facilities. We share the coordinates on a daily basis so that Israel and all parties know where we are operating from. This is supposed to, provide some kind of safety to our staff, to our personnel, to our operations. But as we've seen in this war, it's been incredibly difficult. If I was to describe the situation here, I mean, really, after 10 months, there's just no words. I don't have the words to describe what we see on a daily basis. There's no humanity left here. It's very degrading for the population, but really, when you talk to people, they tell you now that they are really waiting for death, that they have no hope. And it's very hard to hear this from people, that they have no hope to move anymore. They don't know where to go. And that the only peace they are finding is to spend time with their family, to stay sleeping at night with their family, so that if they're killed, if they die together. That is the reality here, and it's absolutely beyond devastating. Sam, I don't know if you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, look, Louise, I think you put it well. I mean, we know, sadly, that war is always dehumanizing, but the dehumanization that we're seeing here is on such a scale that it is, as we've said, it's hard to comprehend precisely what the population are going through on a daily basis. The degradation, the humiliation, the fear, the violence that impacts on every aspect of their lives and their being. I mean, this week, families should be preparing for their children to go back to school. It's the start of the school year. That's 625,000 people in Gaza. We can hear them outside the window right now because life in odd ways continues. I don't know if you can hear it, but there are children playing. There are children doing their best to kind of comprehend what's going on. And many of them are so young that they're ignorant to the realities of what's happening, but they'll see it in their parents' faces, in their grandparents' faces, in the death, in the misery that will impact them now and impact them and impacts us long into the future as UNRWA continues to provide its services and help the population rebuild. There's going to be so many difficult things that we as a community will have to come to terms with, that is also quite hard to get your head around as we deal every day with tragedy, with displacement, and with horrors, with massacres, as if they're normal because they've become such a normal part of people's lives. But it's precisely anything but normal what people are going through here.
Thank you, David.
Yes, Shudoju with China Central Television. First, two quick questions. Do you mind to share where you are in the more specific location? Is that under evacuation or you're in a safe place? And you mentioned that many people, they are very frustrated at the evacuation orders. What about the staffers, your UNRWA staffers? What are their sentiment? Are they share the frustration with other people?
Yeah, look, I can answer. We're in Zaweda, in a part of Gaza called Zaweda, which is in the middle of the Gaza Strip. We have Nusayrat above us, Deir al-Balah below us, and the sea to the west. So we're in the middle area of Gaza, one of the few areas of this part of the Gaza Strip that hasn't been subject to evacuation orders over the past several months. I think part of the 11% of Gaza that hasn't been subject to those evacuation orders. That's where we are. I mean, fighting is close by. I've lost count of how many rockets, bombs, shells that we've heard over the course of the day. I would suggest several dozen, and every one of those is, likely to be a life lost or somebody facing lifelong injuries or losing property that they have spent decades building and investing in. And yes, staff are deeply frustrated, deeply traumatized. I mean, this is a war like no other before that's being played out on everyone's social media, on everyone's television, and phone screen, and they can see that the world knows that this is happening, and yet the world is not able to do anything about it. They want to know why the norms, the international norms that govern the work that they do as employees of a United Nations organization do not apply to them as human beings. These are the questions that they ask, questions for themselves, questions for their children, and it becomes increasingly difficult for us to answer those questions. What more to say?
Yeah, just a follow-up. You just mentioned that the space and ability for UNRWA to operate has become more and more constrained. I'm just wondering, do you still have plan for future operations at this point? And we asked this question many times, that there might be a time if this conflict continues, evacuation orders continues, there might be a time that UN is not able to operate in Gaza. How far do you think we are here today from that point?
I mean, I'd say, first of all, I'd say we continue to operate as UNRWA day in, day out. The staff get up, most of them living in tents in the most abject conditions to serve their communities. That will continue for as long as is possible. People serving the communities, providing the most basic human services and humanity that they can to their fellow human beings. That will continue for as long as we're able to continue. I mean, UNRWA has gone through thick and thin over the past 75 years, but is such an important part of the service delivery infrastructure in Gaza that we will continue for as long as we are able to. The space shrinks, we adjust, we dust ourselves off, we reorient, but it's precisely the investments that the international community has made in UNRWA in terms of human capital, the staff, but also the services and the infrastructure and the systems that we have in place. It's precisely that allows us to continue providing these services in an environment of such abject conditions when everything is needed. UNRWA is uniquely placed, along with others, but unique with the support of others, but we are uniquely placed to meet the needs of the population. So if there ever comes a day when we're not able to continue, it would be an absolute catastrophe for the people who have nowhere else to turn for healthcare, for education, for water, for sanitation, and for protection.
Thank you. Please.
Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. Where is UNRWA in terms of the funding that would be sufficient to continue your operations in Gaza at the present time? And could you clarify in terms of you mentioned that UNRWA to some extent operates separately from other UN agencies, which I assume includes OSHA. So could you clarify that to what extent there are regular interactions with other UN agencies doing work in Gaza? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we coordinate on an absolutely daily basis with everyone in all the sectors in which we work as UNRWA. We're in constant coordination with other UN agencies, with international NGOs, with the Red Cross, with the Red Crescent. The difference when it comes to UNRWA is that almost uniquely amongst United Nations organizations, we deliver our services directly. So we have the teachers, we have the health workers, the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, the sanitation laborers. So when I say we operate in a different way, that was essentially what I meant. It's that direct delivery character of UNRWA as an organization that sets it apart from others. But look, everything that we do comes under the umbrella of the United Nations in terms of joint planning, in terms of joint assessments, common missions, common security assessments, things of that nature.
In terms of funding, sufficiency of funding?
Sorry, yes. In terms of funding, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we currently have funding for our overall operations as UNRWA until the end of September, so until the end of next month. These is funds primarily to pay for the salaries of our doctors, our teachers, etc. So we continue to face a fairly sizable gap for our regular programs, 30,000 staff, many of them in Gaza. And then on top of that, we put out a humanitarian appeal, part of the OCHA appeal for 2024 for $1.2 billion. That was our contribution to the appeal, or our share of the appeal, rather, in April of this year. That appeal, as things stand, is 25% funded. So we're facing a large gap of essentially $900 million on that appeal. But of course, as we all know, the situation in relation to Gaza is as much as partly about funding, but it's also about access, ability to get the aid in, the supplies in, ability to then distribute those supplies and get them to the people safely. And it's precisely because of the inability to do that that we've seen, the most rapid deterioration in food security and malnutrition that we've seen anywhere in the world over the past several decades. So we face a funding shortfall for our appeals, but we also face issues in relation to safety and security, in relation to access. And that's why we're seeing such catastrophic humanitarian impacts, malnutrition, water shortages, disease outbreaks, etc.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions? If not, Louise, Wateridge, and Sam Rose, we thank you very much for your time and for this important briefing. Stéphane is already here to brief you, and his briefing will be followed by the spokesperson for the general briefing.
All right. Good afternoon. Just to update on the Secretary General's travels. He is in Tonga, where this morning he took part in the opening of the 53rd Pacific Islands Forum. He praised Pacific Island leaders for their collective commitments to environmental stewardship and regional peace, and called the region for a beacon of solidarity and strength. The world has much to learn from the Pacific, he said, but the world must also step up in supporting your initiatives. He underscored that the survival plan for our planet is simple: ending the exploitation of coal, oil, and gas fairly and in a way that protects the most vulnerable. All countries have a part to play, he said. He also urged Pacific Island states to end their own dependence on imported fossil fuels and seize the benefits of the clean energy revolution. He also had a number of field visits in Tonga, notably officially commissioning a new early warning system for Tonga. And he also met with youth leaders and also visited a seawall and heard from coastal communities impacted by the rise in the sea level. Yesterday, he also had a series of bilateral meetings with leaders attending the forum. Later today, the Secretary General will take part in the Leaders' Dialogue at 11 a.m. local time. He will also have a press event to launch the World Meteorological Organization's report on the state of climate in the Southwest Pacific. And that press event should be broadcast live via social media platform. And as soon as we know which one, we will share that information with you. I think you've heard quite a bit today on Gaza, both from a senior UN official and just now from an UNRWA colleagues. Just a few more updates to share with you. Obviously, OCHA stresses that the repeated evacuation orders that the Israelis have issued have upended a whole life-saving humanitarian hub that was set up in Deir al-Balah following the evacuation of the Rafah hub back in May. And it, of course, as you heard, severely impacts our ability to deliver essential support and services. Water production in Deir al-Balah was reduced by 85% due to loss of access to water sources in areas designated for evacuation earlier in August. And on polio, after the first confirmed case, our partners on the ground tell us that at least 50,000 children born since the crisis began are highly unlikely to have received any immunization due to the collapse of the health system in Gaza. Yesterday, our colleagues at UNICEF confirmed that 1.2 million doses of the polio vaccine type 2 have been brought in to Gaza to immunize more than 640,000 children, together with WHO and UNRWA. For its part, the World Food Programme says their operations are severely hampered by the intensifying conflict, the limited number of border crossings, and damaged roads. In the last 2 months, WFP has managed to bring in only half of the 24,000 metric tons of food aid required for operations serving 1.1 million people in Gaza. WFP has also had to reduce the contents of food parcels. It also warns that the shell craters and debris is making driving slow and is challenging for truck drivers, even in dry weather. And in 2 months, it's feared that when the rains return, flooding is expected. Most roads will become unusable. WFP says aid workers grapple daily with slow authorization and frequent refusals when asked for permission to move on. Looting and public order problems are also frequent, especially when convoys wait for hours at holding points. And moving to Lebanon, you will have seen that on Sunday we issued a statement in which the Secretary General expressed his deep concern at the exchange of fire that had taken place across the Blue Line. These actions, he said, put both the Lebanese and Israeli populations at risk, as well as threatening regional security and stability. He called for immediate de-escalation. Following yesterday's worrying escalation, peacekeepers in UNIFIL continue to observe exchange of fire across the Blue Line. As UNIFIL continues to carry out its mandated activities in these challenging circumstances, the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plaschert, and the head of the UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, General Aroldo Lazzaro, continue their contacts with the parties in order to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the recent uptick in hostilities has not had a significant humanitarian impact. However, the ongoing conflict continues to severely impact civilians on both sides of the Blue Line. Along with our partners, we continue to scale up relief efforts in support of the Lebanese government-led response. However, humanitarian response efforts are being undermined by funding constraints, and we urgently need additional resources. We call on all parties to follow and to abide by their obligations under international humanitarian law, emphasizing the need to protect civilians, including children and civilian infrastructure at all times. Moving to Sudan, you will have seen that over the weekend the Secretary General spoke with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the President of the Transitional Council of Sudan. The Secretary General and the General discussed the movements of humanitarian aid through Adre crossing and agreed to facilitate the movement of humanitarian supplies to enter the country. It was also agreed to put in place a simplified system for the expedited processing and delivery of humanitarian aid. I can tell you that on Sunday, a convoy from the World Food Programme's trucks crossed from Chad to Sudan via the Adre border crossing, carrying some 205 metric tons of food assistance. That will be for about 17,000 people. That's the second WFP convoy to cross through this crossing. Recently, WFP said the food assistance will be delivered to communities across Darfur, and distributions will start as soon as the trucks arrive. Additional trucks of WFP food assistance are being loaded in Chad to cross into Darfur as soon as possible. WFP has enough food for 500,000 people ready to transport to Sudan through the Adre crossing. The Rome-based agency underscores that humanitarian assistance, such as food and nutrition supplies, shelter and health items, must move quickly and at scale through all border crossings and humanitarian corridors into the hands of communities facing catastrophic levels of hunger. On the other side of Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the Arba At Dam, which is about 38 kilometers northwest of Port Sudan on the Red Sea state, suffered extensive damage due to heavy rains yesterday. Preliminary reports indicate the breach caused extensive damage in 20 villages downstream from the dam. Our humanitarian partners and local authorities are assessing the affected areas and will have additional clarity on the extent of the damage in the coming days. The Arba At Dam is a crucial facility in Port Sudan, serving as a primary source of fresh water for the city. The reported damage is expected to have a substantial impact on water supplies to Port Sudan, worsening the humanitarian situation. And moving to Ukraine, Matthias Schmale, the humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, condemned the massive attack by Russian armed forces that took place today, which reportedly caused civilian casualties and damage to civilian energy infrastructure in 15 oblasts around the country. That's what the government of Ukraine is telling our colleagues in Ukraine. This comes after intense hostilities over the weekend, which reportedly caused 60 civilian casualties, including journalists in the Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Sumy regions, and resulted in damage and destruction of homes and other civilian infrastructure. Our humanitarian partners report the residents in these regions continue to flee for safety, with mandatory evacuations announced in several towns. Humanitarian organizations responded immediately to these attacks across Ukraine, distributing emergency supplies. And I was asked about the attacks in Pakistan, and I can tell you that the Secretary General strongly condemns the attacks that took place on August 26 in Pakistan's Balochistan province, which reportedly led to the deaths of at least 39 people. The Secretary General stresses that attacks against civilians are unacceptable. He extends his deepest condolences to the families and calls on the government of Pakistan to conduct an investigation and to ensure that those responsible are held to account. And yesterday in Myanmar, we marked the 7 years since the forced mass displacement of Rohingya people and other communities from Myanmar's Rakhine state. To mark this sad milestone, you will have seen that we issued a statement in which the Secretary General called on all parties to the conflict in Myanmar to end the violence and to ensure the protection of civilians in accordance with international human rights standards and international humanitarian law. The Special Envoy for Myanmar, Julie Bishop, is engaging all stakeholders, including regional actors, to move towards an inclusive Myanmar-led process for sustainable peace and national reconciliation that are important steps to create the conditions conducive to the safe, the voluntary, and the dignified and sustainable return of Rohingya people to their homes in Myanmar. And a reminder that about 1 million Rohingya people are sheltering in Bangladesh and over 130,000 more across the region without any immediate prospect for return. The Secretary General renews his appeal to strengthen the regional protection efforts to provide access to conflict-affected communities and further support host communities, including through the 2024 Joint Humanitarian Response Plan for Bangladesh. And on a related note, in World Food Program says that last weekend it began distributing food assistance for families impacted by recent floods in Myanmar's Ayeyarwady Delta region. WFP noted an estimated 500,000 men, women, and children are living in areas exposed to flooding in that delta. In Ayeyarwady, initial reports from WFP's partners indicate that hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland have now been inundated. In the hardest hit areas, urgent needs include food, safe drinking water, and sanitation. Over the coming days, WFP plans to assist 35,000 flood-impacted people in evacuation centers with rice and fortified biscuits. This assistance will be coupled with nutrition support for mothers and children to prevent acute malnutrition. In the rest of the country, the agency's food assistance has so far reached 130,000 people impacted by floods in various provinces, and WFP is assessing needs in Rakhine. Turning to Afghanistan, over the weekend, Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, said that the quote-unquote morality law recently promulgated by the de facto authorities further restrict human rights and freedoms, particularly of women. She added that this is unconscionable, and if maintained, the law can only impede Afghanistan's return to international fold. Also, in a statement, the special representative for the Secretary General for Afghanistan, Rosa Otunbayeva, said the quote-unquote morality law extends the already intolerable restrictions on the rights of Afghan women and girls, even if the sound of even the sound of a female voice outside the home apparently deemed a moral violation. Her statement is online. She's expected to brief the Security Council on the 18th of September. And sorry, one more note from Bangladesh, which has suffered from flash floods triggered by heavy rainfall and upstream water flows from India. Our team on the ground are providing water and purification tablets, hygiene kits, and food. As we mentioned before, the humanitarian community in Bangladesh launched its first ever humanitarian response plan for cyclone and monsoon floods last month, targeting 1.2 million people to help. To date, some 700,000 people have been reached, with just 20% of the $80 million requested having been received. Before I turn you over to Monica, I will answer questions. Deji, then Edie.
Hi, Steph. Evacuation orders in Gaza. We have counted that in the first 3 weeks in August, there are about 11 evacuation orders from Israeli military, which means less than 2 days for one evacuation order. And now Wikipedia even has a page dedicated to Gaza Strip evacuations. Does the Secretary General think the evacuation orders are what the Israel claimed that a protection of civilians in such a circumstances now?
We've counted 16. Okay.
In the first 3 weeks?
In August.
In August.
Okay. Okay. These evacuation orders, I think, as you've been told just this morning from various people, make our work nearly impossible. Part of protecting civilians is ensuring that civilians can eat, that people can wash themselves, they have access to medicine, they have access to the most basic needs that human beings need to survive. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. I wonder if you could clarify a senior...
I'm always very weary of questions that start with, I wonder if you could clarify.
A senior UN official told us that the United Nations couldn't operate in Gaza today because of an evacuation order yesterday by the Israeli Defense Forces that forced the closure of the UN Operations Office in Deir al-Balah, and yet the two UNRWA officials who briefed us just before you said that UNRWA was continuing to operate today, that they probably 15,000 Palestinians received health care and other operations were ongoing. Can you please explain this discrepancy?
The UNRWA, my reading from listening to and watching our two amazing UNRWA colleagues is that UNRWA is, given the way they're embedded with the population, is able to operate in situ with people who are already there. So that's one thing. What our senior UN official was referring to is UN officials and UN humanitarian staff moving about, trying to get to places. So again, I think this reflects what we've been saying really since the beginning, it's humanitarian work done on an opportunistic basis. Obviously, if humanitarian workers are embedded with a certain population in a certain area and they have the tools to operate and to share and to distribute, they will do so. But it is half a drop in a barrel. Amélie, then Joe, and then Abdelhamid.
Thanks. It's a follow-up to Edie's question, more clarification. Do I understand correctly then that means that the halt in operation is about transporting, moving to the different places, but where there are some already aid that it would be delivered anyway?
Exactly. I mean, what we're talking about is UNRWA being embedded in places. So if they are there and they're able to help, they will help and they will distribute. We're not able to move people from point A to point B. We're not able to go find people. Joe.
Thank you. I have two questions, actually. The first deals with Sudan. You mentioned that the Secretary General was able to communicate with the head of the transitional government in Sudan. Is it correct to assume that he has still been unable to communicate with the head of the militia? And related to that question is the lack of communication with militia leadership going to be hindering the ability to deliver humanitarian aid in parts of Sudan that are controlled by the militia? That's the first question.
Let's face it, what's hindering the delivery of humanitarian aid in Sudan is the fact that both parties are continuing to fight, right? And indiscriminately, without much regard for the lives of their own people. The Secretary General has not had any recent contact with the head of the Rapid Support Force, but others, both on the humanitarian and the political end, remain in contact with the Rapid Support Force.
Okay, because you did mention in your opening remarks that the transitional government leadership appeared to be at least more cooperative in terms of discussing specifics for access
Well, I just
to different
reported,
parts of Sudan.
I'm not doing compare and contrast. I'm just reporting on the conversations that were had, and we've seen some results of some more trucks coming in.
All right. And my second question has to do with the Houthi attack in recent days on the oil tanker and the question of whether there's a potentially very significant risk of oil spillage and environmental hazards. Has the UN been able to, or will it plan to, assess the degree of environmental hazard as a result of the Houthi attack?
I mean, let me just put it this way. We're not able to go in situ to evaluate the hazard, but one doesn't need to be an environmental expert to understand that a oil tanker with 150,000 tons of crude oil, which has lost its engine power, which is anchored in the Red Sea with most of its, if not all of its crew been evacuated, is a huge environmental risk to the surrounding area, and we're very worried about it. We're worried about the fact that we're now hearing that there possibly was some sort of a fire aboard that ship. We strongly condemn the attacks on this ship, which endangers the ecology, endangers people, endangers seafarers. We've spoken again and again in the last years of the risks of oil spills in this area due to the ongoing fighting. There's a Security Council resolution 2722. It must be fully respected, and we particularly call on the Houthis to immediately cease all attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea. Did I say Abdelhamid?
Thank you, Stéphane. I think you heard the statement by Israeli Security Minister Ben Gvir is that he wants to build a synagogue inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. How come a statement passes on UN officials, especially who are there, like Tor Winsland, without any comment?
Okay. These kinds of statements are highly, these types of statements are highly counterproductive, to say the least. They risk inflaming a situation which is already bone dry. There is a status quo agreed to the parties for the holy sites in Jerusalem. That must be respected by all, not only by indeed, but also in statements.
My second question about the evacuation at Al-Aqsa Hospital. I asked this morning and I didn't get the full details of what's happening. If you can share with us.
I don't have any more. I don't have any more details. We've asked for WHO, and I still don't. I'll try to get you some more details.
Last thing, as you know, the school year is starting. There are 620,000 children in Gaza must go back to school. Could you help us bring a UNESCO official so we can maybe have a question and answer to it?
I mean, I think the people who are best able to answer that are UNRWA colleagues, because they run a huge school network. Again, it's not difficult to imagine the damage done to a child who not only is not able to go to school, but is not able to go to school in a war zone, right? And has to worry about their own safety, the safety of their families, and of seeing their loved ones and their friends killed, and have and don't have access to enough.
The UNESCO, they are silent.
No, I don't think they are. I don't think they are silent. But what I'm saying, you can ping UNESCO. I'm saying it's UNRWA is dealing for the UN side with the schooling in Gaza. Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is Lablu answer. I have 3 on Bangladesh situation. All over Bangladesh in the last 1.5 weeks, after the interim government resumed the power, there has been filed more than thousands cases, murder cases, corruption cases.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
After resuming the interim government headed by Dr. Muhammad Yunus, there has been filed more than thousands murder case and corruption cases against about 5 million Bangladeshi citizens, including them international renowned cricketer Saqib Al Hasan, who visiting outside of Bangladesh, and also the senior journalist.
What is the question?
In this process, and arrest every day thousands of people, in this way, UN has any concern the authority use of tactics to suppress people of dissident as a violation of human rights?
We have no doubt that the interim authorities in Bangladesh, who are taking over at an extremely challenging time for the country, both politically and on the humanitarian end, will do whatever they can to ensure that the rule of law and justice is followed. You have another question.
I have another. It is 2 weeks, Dr. Muhammad Yunus took over the interim government head. However, the law and order situation did not improve. The members of the police force have not been able to return to duty comfortably so far.
I can't give a play-by-play, hour-by-hour of what is reaction to what is going on in Bangladesh. I think my answer to your first question applies to the second. Your third.
Yeah, it is on the flood situation. You already.
Yes, and flood. I think I've answered that. Yeah.
And is there any plan to send financial and food grain?
Well, as I said, the UN humanitarian are there. They've already helped 700,000 people out of the 1.2 million that were targeted. Yes, sir, and then Edie, and then we'll hand it over to Monica. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Can I have comment on the Secretary General's recent report on laws, lethal lethal autonomous weapon system, so which was issued on Friday report.
I think I commented extensively on that on Friday.
Yeah, that was really okay.
Yeah, okay.
And the second question is just for the Rakhine State. While I was in Rakhine, there was many criticism to WFP from the Buddhist side of the people that the UN is only supporting the Rohingya only. How the operation is going to the the local Rakhine people?
I can tell you that humanitarian aid, whether it's WFP, whether it's UNICEF, whether it's WHO, is distributed to people in need, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their religion, or any other criteria. The only criteria that matters is need. Edie, you're in need of an answer.
A follow-up on the ship that was hit by the Houthis in the Red Sea. Is the UN or is anyone else trying to make arrangements to assess the damage and see if the oil can be offloaded?
I will check with our local colleagues. On that note, Monica, all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is already 1:10, more or less, so I will be brief. We have 2 notes, and we are going to exit this room. So I start with something for your diaries, which is taking place tomorrow. The President of the General Assembly, Mr. Denis Francis, will preside tomorrow, 27th of August, over a plenary meeting under agenda item 121, question of the equitable representation on and increase in the membership of the Security Council and other matters related to the Security Council. Earlier this month, the PGA indicated in a letter to member states after informal consultations his intention to present a draft oral decision for adoption at the plenary meeting of the GA. The meeting will start at 10 a.m. at the GA Hall. Among the points to be acted upon by the GA are the immediate continuation of intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform in informal plenary of the GA at its next session, convening the open-ended working group on the question of equitable representation on and increase in the membership of the Security Council during the 79th session of the GA, if member states so decide. Member states will also decide whether to include in the agenda of the next session the item entitled Question of Equitable Representation on an Increase in the Membership of the Security Council and Other Matters. So this meeting will take place tomorrow, and it will be webcast for you, and more information on the PJ's website. And last but not least, the PGA has circulated a letter to member states with the provisional program of the high-level plenary meeting of the GA to commemorate and promote the International Day Against Nuclear Tests. This meeting is scheduled to take place on the 4th of September. We're talking about next Tuesday after Labor Day in the United States of America, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the General Assembly Hall. So the actual day, you may remember, is marked on 29 August each year. Mr. Francis expressed his intention to invite several speakers, including representatives of civil society and academia. And among the guests are Dr. Robert Floyd, the Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, CTBTO, Ms. Vivian Okeki, Director of the IAEA Liaison Office here in New York, Mr. Shizuka Kuramitsu, Research Assistant, Arms Control Association, former UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, Youth Champion, and Professor Sharon Wisquasoni, Elliott School of International Affairs, the George Washington University. They will speak in the second part of the meeting, which will start at 10:45. The opening slot will hear remarks from Mr. Francis, our PJ, and also from Mr. Adedejibi Ebo, Director and Deputy to the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, on behalf of the Secretary General. And member states are encouraged to deliver regional group statements, also other statements. So for tomorrow, I will bring you a trip announcement for the PGA, and this is everything we have for now. Do you have anything else here? How are you, Hamid? Good to see you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
You know, the ICJ legal opinion on occupation came back to the G8. It was issued based on a request by the General Assembly. So what is the plan of the General Assembly to operationalize that legal opinion, if you have any to share with us?
But thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I don't have any details or any news for you on this. But as soon as we have, I'll bring it to you. Anything else here or on the screen? No? Have a wonderful lunch. I see you tomorrow. Thanks.